Can an update package change the fate of a whole season? What if I told you that Ferrari is about to play his last major letter at home in Imola? Stay, because today we are going to unravel the technical, emotional and strategic keys that could mark the rebirth or the definitive fall of the Scuderia. Ferrari started the 2025 season wrapped in a powerful, almost epic narrative. The return of a heptacampion in the world, Lewis Hamilton, aboard a red car, accompanied by Charles Leclerc, the local favorite and young face of Maranello. The message was clear, this time. However, just a few races were enough for this promise to collapse before the harsh reality of the track performance. The SF25, far from being a competitive weapon, began to show alarming symptoms of structural weakness. Collective illusion, especially among tifosi, quickly transformed into frustration. The narrative that should have been redempted was dyed with helplessness. Since the beginning of the campaign, the SF25 has evidenced technical failures that not only affect the speed, but the confidence of those who drive it. Its Achilles heel is in the lack of aerodynamic load on the rear axle, a technical detail that generates instability especially in slow curves, where the precision and control of the pilot are everything. This characteristic severely limits the performance of the car in classification, making some of its pilots fight for the first rows. This lack also translates into poor traction when leaving curves, something that penalizes in the wheel runs, as seen dramatically in circuits such as Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. For Lewis Hamilton, adaptation has been more than a technical challenge. It has been a wall. The British pilot has openly noted not to feel comfortable with the SF25, especially with the way in which it responds to balance changes and braking weight. This level of disconnection was evidenced in the Chinese Grand Prix, where he tried to lower the height of the car looking for performance, which resulted in a disqualification due to excessive wear on the bottom plate. A risky decision that shows despair to find immediate solutions, but also the internal disorder in technical decision-making. On the other hand, Charles Leclerc has managed to squeeze more the car, which has generated even more questions inside the garage. His pilot style, more aggressive on the front train, seems to adapt better to the unstable characteristics of the car. But even he has raised his voice to point out the limitations of SF25. In some races he has achieved decent podiums or results, but not without difficulty. The difference in performance between the two pilots has opened an underground debate about whether the car is more refined to Leclerc's style than Hamilton's, something that, if confirmed, would be very serious in terms of joint development. The situation reached a critical point in the Miami Grand Prix. In a chaotic race and full of strategic errors, the two Ferrari pilots starred in an unusual radio fight with their engineers. The scene, both struggled for 7th place. Not for the podium or for crucial points for the championship. For a 7th place behind even a Williams. The implicit message was devastating. The most laureate team in the history of Formula One, reduced to an internal battle by mediocrity. Instead of solutions, reproaches were heard. Instead of progress, there was confusion. All this technical, emotional and strategic context makes Imola's previous one in a decisive moment. The collapse is not only performance. It is of narrative, of expectations, of leadership. And the most serious, it is happening before the eyes of the world, just in the year where Ferrari had to recover his contender status. The stage is prepared and the chips are falling. Now, just know if the Scuderia has the real ability to give this disastrous campaign a radical turn. In the midst of the technical and emotional chaos that Ferrari has lived in this seasonal start, a word has emerged that, although fragile, is repeated insistently within the paddock of Maranello: Esperanza. The first European calendar event not only represents one more race, but the turning point planned by the Scuderia to reverse a dynamic of failure. 4 weeks, the team has been developing an update package that, according to their own words, could change the behavior of the SF25. The interesting thing is not only the technical content of these improvements, but the symbolic burden they entail. It is Ferrari at home trying to redeem himself before his. The announcement of these updates was not an improvised movement. From before the Chinese Grand Prix, Ferrari began to filter the press that would take an important technical package to Imola. At the time, there was even a comprehensive improvement. But with the passing of the weeks, the tone has changed. What was previously communicated as a revolution is now described as a progressive step within the development plan. Fred Vasseur, in recent statements, wanted to cool the initial enthusiasm, clarifying that these improvements will not magically transform the SF25, but they do represent a crucial advance to stabilize their performance. The question is inevitable. Ferrari is lowering expectations to protect yourself from a possible new failure? As for the technical content, the leaks point to several action fronts. One of the most important changes will be on the front wing, redesigned to optimize aerodynamic flow and improve load on the previous axis. There is also talk of a new floor which will seek to reduce the bounce of the car and increase curve stability. The latter is particularly relevant, since many of the problems of the SF25 originate in the way in which the flat background interacts with the air flow in tracks with low-speed curves. In addition, work has been worked on rear suspension settings, focused on improving traction when leaving curve, one of the big headaches for Hamilton. Together, these improvements are expected not only to increase performance, but to give the car a wider configuration window. Another key aspect of this package is in thermal management. Ferrari has identified that in extreme heat conditions, the SF25 suffers a decrease in yield due to brake overheating and rear tires. In that sense, part of the cooling system has also been redesigned, with new ducts that would allow a better heat dissipation, especially in urban or high thermal cargo such as Miami. This detail, although not as meaty as aerodynamic elements, could be fundamental to achieve a more constant car along the career stint. But beyond the figures, carbon pieces and graphics in the wind tunnel, which is at stake in Imola, is much deeper. Ferrari needs to recover his identity, not as a brand but as a racing team. Imola will not simply be the headquarters of technical improvements. It will be the fire test of a structure that resists returning to irrelevance. An emotional and technical test that will measure not only if the SF25 can go faster, but if it can be competitive again in a maximum pressure environment. Because if these updates do not work, the team will have no other way to start looking at 2026. And that, in sports and symbolic terms, would be a much larger defeat than any abandonment on the track. Imola is not another circuit in the calendar. For Ferrari, it represents something almost sacred. It is running at home, in front of its people, on a route that is named after Enzo and Dino Ferrari. And in 2025, this race has acquired an even greater weight. It has become the stage of a true crossroads. Everything that has happened in the first 6 dates has led to this point. Each error, every disappointment, every word of frustration issued by Hamilton or Leclerc has built the narrative that will culminate in the S-Chrome Enzo e Dino Ferrari. What happens there will not only determine the technical course of the SF25, but also the strategic decisions of the team for the remainder of the year. If the updates that Ferrari will take to Imola achieve the impact that is expected, they could reactivate the season and return the Scuderia to the conversation for the podiums and perhaps even for specific victories. It would not be crazy to imagine Leclerc or Hamilton fighting again in the lead, especially if the circuit conditions adapt well to the new characteristics of the car. A good result in Imola would also mean a powerful mood injection for pilots, engineers, and, above all, for the fans. It would be the confirmation that the work of the last months has not been in vain, that there is a clear direction, and that, although late, Ferrari has found the correct technical course. But the other scenario is also possible, and it is the one that most worries within the team. If the improvements do not work, if the performance of the SF25 does not show clear signs of progress in classification and career rhythm, then the team will have to make a painful but inevitable decision: to terminate the fight for this championship and focus all the resources towards the development of the 2026 car. In the internal language of Formula One, that is translated as throwing the towel of the present to ensure the future. It is a valid strategy, often necessary, but that leaves a very deep emotional mark. For a team like Ferrari, who lives from his history and his passion, that kind of resignation does not go unnoticed. The impact of that decision would also affect the internal dynamics of the team. For Hamilton, who came with the illusion of closing his career fighting for titles, the idea of spending a blank year can be difficult to accept. And for Leclerc, who has supported years of technical ups and downs, it would be a new frustration in his long way for consolidation as a champion. In addition, in terms of development, prioritizing 2026 implies redirecting factory resources, curbing the SF25 updates flow, and losing competitiveness in the second half of the season. All this happens while direct rivals such as McLaren and Mercedes continue to evolve. Therefore, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix is presented as a point of no return. It is not only one more race in the standings. It is the scenario where Ferrari must demonstrate, in front of the world and in front of himself, if he can still be the protagonist in 2025. If he can correct the technical course. If you can cohese your team. If you can return a car to your pilots at the height of your ambitions. Imola will decide not only the next results, but the complete narrative of the season. And perhaps even something deeper, Ferrari's credibility as a real aspiring to the titles in the new age of Formula One. The Imola Grand Prix is loaded with attention that goes beyond the usual competitiveness of Formula One. It is not only about points or positions, but about the very credibility of a historical team. Ferrari has reached this moment with his back against the wall, accumulating mistakes, doubts and expectations breached. The introduction of the update package represents its most serious attempt to correct the course. But in such a volatile season and with rivals as solid as McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull, every opportunity that is allowed to become a weight of failure. Therefore, what happens in Imola will not be just a technical evaluation. It will be an emotional verdict for the entire Maranello structure. The symbolic weight of running at home is not a minor detail. In Imola, the Scuderia not only faces the stopwatch or the other teams, but the collective memory of its followers, the legends that forged the name of Ferrari, and the urgent need to recover the respect lost on the tracks. This race is a mirror where reality will be reflected without filters. If the improvements work, they could rekindle the season and give the team a new impulse. If they fail, Ferrari's inability will be exposed once again to build a truly competitive project in the modern era. Formula One does not expect anyone. Each race is a sentence, every return a lost or exploited opportunity. Ferrari has promised a lot and delivered little at this beginning of 2025. Imola is therefore his last great opportunity to rewrite this year's narrative. Because if not now, then when?